Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons. We're going to talk about escapism. So I'm incredibly blessed to have really engaged commenters, and recently there's been a lot of talk about escapism, and um, uh, I want to say preserving people championing escapism and saying that escapism is valuable in Dungeons & Dragons. So I want to set the record straight. I want to set the record straight on where I stand, and I want to set the record straight on how a dungeon master, in my humble opinion, should approach escapism. All right. So one, I want to be clear because there's one of the reasons why I'm talking about this in a distinct video is there's a lot of talk in the comments and people are kind of talking past each other, and I just want to bring clarity. Okay. So all right. So let's get into this. So Dungeons and Dragons and escapism, right? Oil and water, they do not mix. You should not be using Dungeons and Dragons for escapism, in my humble opinion. It's flat out wrong, right? And now I will say this: I want everybody to understand. I understand that Dungeons and Dragons is absolutely used for escapism by specific dungeon masters. That is happening. I recognize that, right? So basically, I'm trying to change the way I talk about dungeon masters. Let's talk about dungeon masters from the perspective of a race, right? Like there are actually 5Ks. Okay, if you've ever done a 5K, there's always within 50 miles, half the people are going to be the same who run 5Ks, right? They show up to everything and they just run all the 5Ks, right? So think of dungeon masters as a group of 5K runners, right? So when you run 20 5Ks, you know where you're going to end, right? Like you might have an outlier here and there, but you know where you're going to end, right? You're either going to end up with the gold, you're going to end up with the silver, or you're going to end up with the bronze, okay? If you do any of those, you're a podium dungeon master, okay? You could be a gold tier dungeon master. You could be a silver tier dungeon master. You could be a bronze tier dungeon master. And then there's the non-podiums, right? So everyone who is running Dungeons & Dragons for escapism, let's be super clear. These are non-podium dungeon masters, right? Now even within podium dungeon masters, they have different color medals, right? But let me put it this way. If you're running it Dungeons & Dragons for escapism, you're a non-podium dungeon master, flat out, right? Now, why do people run Dungeons & Dragons for escapism? They run it for two reasons. These dungeon masters are settled and nescient. Settled. They don't want to grow. They don't want to learn. They're settled, right? They're like, Dungeons and Dragons for cutting goblins in half, and that's all I want to do. And I want to make sure everybody has fun at the table, and that fun better match mine, right? And that fun better not require me as a dungeon master to learn anything or grow in any way, right? Like they're settled, right? So people who use Dungeons and Dragons for escapism are settled. They're also nescient, Nescient, right? They are nescient of art. They are nescient of the power of narrative. They are nescient of passion. They are nescient of imagination. They are nescient. Okay? So people who use Dungeons & Dragons for escapism are settled and nescient. Okay? Dungeon masters who do this. Now, the reason why you should not use Dungeons & Dragons for escapism is because Dungeons & Dragons, flat out, in my humble opinion, can be used for progress. And when you allow yourself, when you are championing being settled and being nescient, you are never going to progress. You're never going to benefit yourself. No one at your table is going to learn anything. No one at your table is going to grow, right? And I will say flat out, you will see it right in the comments. There will be people who will champion saying, no, Dungeons & Dragons is just for escapism, and we're proud of that, right? And it's shocking that anyone would champion being settled and being nescient. It is really sad, right? And so the reality is Dungeons & Dragons is for progression. Dungeons & Dragons is for benefit, in my humble opinion. And if you allow yourself to fall into the trap of using Dungeons & Dragons for escapism, you will always be a non-podiumed dungeon master. You're never going to have the bronze medal. You're never going to have the silver medal. You're never going to have the gold, right? You're just going to serve up pablum and do nothing with your table, right? Don't do it. Don't fall into this. Don't be settled. Don't be nescient. Understand what Dungeons & Dragons is. It is absolutely for progress and for benefit for you and for your players, for you to learn and grow. in my humble opinion. All that's my humble opinion. I'm ready to hear your humble opinion. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.